more. You are listening to another episode of the Keep the Change podcast, one of the most rated financial literacy podcasts in the country, if not the best. It's just ahead of Checks and Balances. And we've got James from Lighthouse Financial in the studio to dissect another great topic, mate. How do you feel just being just under Keep the Change? Would that be about right?
Oh, it's a privilege and an honour, Luke.
Good to be back, mate, and pick your brains. Today we're going to be talking about major money milestones to accomplish in your 30s.
Yeah, a lot happening in your 30s.
I'm at 36, mate. So I was about to say I'm halfway through, but I'm actually past halfway through.
I was seeing this thing the other day going like in your 30s, you either, for blokes, you either join a run club, cycling, golf, or cook meat. Like you get into barbecuing. Like it's one of those things, right? So what's it going to be for you, my guy?
I started saunering. Yeah, but I think I
start a podcast, is it?
Yeah. Fuck. Yeah. Fortunately, people actually listen to this one. Some people are like, yeah, I'm going to do that. Like, okie dokie. Well, yeah, what are people doing in their 20s these days, I wonder?
I don't know. I don't know. Don't talk to people in their 20s. Nah, I'm probably working out, like, I guess nobody knows who the hell they are, right? That's maybe a little bit too deep. But getting like, a lot of people doing their OEs in their 20s.
True.
Maybe trying to find, in their later 20s, like a significant other, working out their career, waking up with hangovers a lot on the weekend.
Yeah.
Living their best life.
Yeah. Well, I started writing the description for this pod before we'd even done it, mate. And I put here, I spent most of my 20s pissing up and not preparing for my future years. It seems younger people are a bit more switched on these days, thank God. So you're probably not doing that. But what do you need to be doing? So what do people need to be doing to ensure that they can hit these milestones in their 30s?
Well, if you're in your 30s, there's a lot of things going on and a lot of them are bloody expensive. If I can rattle off some of the things that have happened to me, I've started a business, I've got married, I've had a kid, I've bought a house, I've got a kid in daycare. Oh, let's talk about daycare. And your income is starting to increase as well. So you've got all of these costs happening that you need to look to fund, but then you've got your income should be hopefully starting to move in the right direction. You've got to factor in if you're going to have kids, are people taking time off parental leave? Are you planning for that well? So actually a lot of this comes down to, funnily enough, from the financial advisor, really good planning, having a really good plan to work out what are these milestones and how we're going to work through them. So
do you want to list some of them out? Then we can perhaps talk about what they are.
Yeah. So buying a house. Buying a house probably be a good one to start with. Getting married. You have a significant other, you probably want to go on a holiday at some point. You don't just want to grind your whole life. So a holiday is probably a good one. Having kids is a big one. And rising incomes, like maybe starting a business, probably just like your career path in general. Like, are you going to be that person that takes that punt at that? I'm sure you see it next advisory, right? There's people in their 30s going, I've got a skill set. Am I going to go and do something else?
Interestingly, mate, there's an increasing amount of people that are in their, say, late 30s getting in touch about buying a business. So 1 in 2 businesses in New Zealand are owned by people over the age of 50. So they're either going to close those down or try and sell them. Now, that creates an opportunity for people who have built some wealth or equity or even skills that they can then apply to one of those businesses to perhaps take it over.
And the other thing that's happened, which has made those sellers, dare I say, more desperate, is when COVID hit, there might have been people pretty much ready to sell and walk away, and then the world changed and people weren't able to sell for a period of time, and then the international market wasn't attractive. So there might be people who have actually been wanting to get out for a few years, not just because of age, but they've been delayed as well.
Yeah, and I think as well, some of the older business owners at the moment are just like, I'm not doing this recession and this technology thing and this AI thing. Get fucked. I'm out of here. Like, I'm selling this business. I'm closing it down. See you later. And so they are taking them to the market, which is interesting because I think listings are quite high. Okay, buying a house. I found this stat before we ripped into the pod, mate, from One Roof, who recently reported that the average age of first home buyers has climbed from 25 in 1970 to nearly 37 now. And this article was from 2023. So we're now into 2024. I'd imagine that number is only going to increase because people are delaying it. People are holidaying, going on OEs and doing things like that in their 20s, or struggling to save a bloody deposit.
Yeah. I mean, the gap between incomes and house prices, and it's never going to get fixed for a whole range of different reasons. Housing is just going to become more and more expensive over time. I think we just have to be realistic about that's what's going on. And if we've done some stats recently, and we've got an episode Checks and Balances coming up on this. In 1987, the average income was $19,000. I think the average house price was like $60,000. And we fast forward to today, average income's $80,000, and the average house price is like $900K. So like the 3 times income versus like 9 times your income. And then, the boomers will go, our interest rates were 17%.
Go on, James.
Yeah. But then as I sniff my whiskey and take a sip and go, are you kidding me, mate?
Yeah. From the Coro Lounge, about to fly business class.
Yeah, where everybody lives. Now, so there's those stats. But then as a percentage of your income, the average income back in the 80s, it was like 40% of your income would go towards your mortgage repayments. Now the average income with the average mortgage repayment, it's like 85% of your income. So it's really hard to own a home. And I think in New Zealand, there is this perception that owning your home is like a sign of success, right?
Yes.
Like your parents are proud of you. You own a piece of dirt. There's a couple of bricks that you can call your own, but
you can call it your own.
Yeah, you can pay rates. Congratulations, as the council becomes more and more screwed up.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I think there's a really like good conversation to have around whether home ownership is for everybody and whether that should be everybody's goal. Because I've certainly, once again, having a financial plan and applying it to your personal situation, I've had lots of people where I'm going, I don't think you should buy a house, because when I can look at the bank has worked out a way to give you the debt. I am looking at your actual expenses, your actual income, and the life you want to live. You're never going to pay this off. You're going to, the rising percentage of people going into retirement with a mortgage is terrifying. And then when your income drops away, what the hell are you going to do? I saw that, it might have been a year ago or so, poverty in retirement. And finally, I have people come to me where they go, some people in their early 30s, a real big driver, because, a lot of people aren't thinking I'm going to spend some money on a financial plan at that point. They've seen their parents struggle with money and they're like, I don't want that. So you need to have that, property is a great tool. And I can wax on for hours about how good of a tool property is. But look, you got 7% interest rates. On $1 million loan, you're paying $70,000 in interest a year, and that's after tax money, right? That's like $100,000 north before tax. So we've got to think and go, is this the right thing for us to do?
Yeah, that's one thing I would say, that by your 30s, you're going to have a massive advantage if you understand how money works. And when I say how money works, I mean spend 2 years listening to podcasts and educating yourself on how money gets created and how it flows through the system. Why did house prices used to only cost that? Why do they cost what they are now? Because so many people will just tell you, property always goes up. Yeah, how come? Because someone told me. It's every 10 years. But why? Why? And no, a lot of people can't actually tell you why. And even if you start asking your parents and baby boomers and stuff who have lived through, get this, mate, the other day, this baby boomer said to me, where are you going to get 7% returns? That's unicorn thinking. I'm like, fuck, dude, you lived through one of the greatest asset inflation bubbles and you think that 7% is massively high? I'm like, what are you doing? So in your 30s, if you can learn about taxes, interest rates, debt, how money works, and then even increasing your income, then I reckon you've armed yourself with some skills that potentially in your 20s you're thinking, you know what, I'm going to worry about that later. That's definitely what I did. I just thought, I'll make heaps of money in my life. Who cares about that shit? But you've still got time because you're in your 30s, and most people look for retirement at 65. I think that once you start learning some of that stuff too, you'll realize that the traditional path, you probably won't retire at 65, but you probably can't unless you're doing things to combat that. So you actually need a plan and have to have a plan, but you've still got a good 35 years of working. And then even then you'll probably get going and start listening to a podcast and then realize people are living longer. Oh, holy shit, how long could I live? What's going to happen in terms of health and stuff? Maybe 65 isn't this magic number. I've got to be thinking different about heaps of this stuff.
Yeah. And like essentially it's just all a balance, right? You want to enjoy your best life now because you're not going to be any younger than you are now. And you also don't want to screw yourself for the future. So it is all about balance, but you're certainly right. Knowledge is power.
Getting in the KiwiSaver fund that suits you and your situation is key to making sure you're maximizing your investment. Generate are an award-winning KiwiSaver provider with a track record of long-term performance, and they can help you do exactly this. Their advisors can meet with you to talk about all your options when it comes to KiwiSaver to help you decide what's best for you. Too many people never get KiwiSaver advice, but not you. Go to generatekiwisaver.co.nz/change to book a no-obligation chat with a Generate advisor. A copy of the product disclosure statement is available at generatekiwisaver.co.nz. The issuer of the scheme is Generate Investment Management Limited, and of course, past performance does not guarantee future returns.
Coming back to buying a house. So there's a few things I want to touch on there, right? So it's not necessarily the best thing for everybody. So that is a huge flag I want to raise. The benefit of potentially looking to buy a house, and we're talking about buying a house in the current market, is house prices. I mean, I don't like talking about trying to time the market, right? Because it's just a sucker's game. However, if you were to time the market and look at, okay, what do I think is going to happen over the next 12 months? And we go, well, inflation was at 7%. Inflation was at 7%. It's down to 4%. Most are calling it'll be back within the Reserve Bank's band of 1% to 3% over the long term by probably the end of the year. Once we're back within the band, interest rates is going to start coming down, go from 7% to 6.5% to 6%. Where they'll set long term, who knows, conversation for another day. Then you've got, I don't know if you know, but in a recession, bloody hard to be a property developer. So a lot of them have been falling over. We're building, not many houses right now, and we're letting like 150,000 people into the country, right? So we've got our supply dropping, our demand increasing, and what do Kiwis love? Property. And the amount of people sitting around not wanting to do anything right now because of what the market is. And as soon as the momentum builds, I'm actually quite concerned about what would happen next year. So it's not about necessarily going with buying a house. Should I buy it right now? For the next 6 months, because I don't really think anything's going to happen for the rest of the year. I think there'll be some more optimism next year. But if you want to own a property long term, I certainly think in 12 or 24 months, there is a risk that house is a lot more expensive. In terms of buying a home, in terms of whether you can or not, it's so interesting. And I'm sure Mikey's talked to you about this before, and my Mike's talked to me about it a lot as well. We both got Mikes in our lives. It's okay. We'll never let them meet. Is going...
Maybe they're the same person.
Maybe they are.
They're definitely not.
Yeah. Where were you? It is... A lot of people go, I'm ages away from being able to buy my first home. But by the time you're 30, you've been contributing to KiwiSaver for 10 years. Your partner's probably been contributing 10 years. If you've got a partner, maybe you've saved a bit of cash. A lot of people are a hell of a lot closer than they think they are. So if buying a home is something that's important to you, then I would have a chat with your mortgage broker or with a bank and go, how close am I? And if you are close, and if this is something if you do want to buy a house at some point in your life, if that is one of your goals, the answer is you should buy it as soon as you can, because it's never going to be cheaper over the long term than it is right now.
Just reminds me from today, mate. I have somebody comment on Instagram saying how, they were confident about buying a home last year, but they're not so sure anymore, and they've put their application in. And I was like, did you do this with a mortgage advisor? And they're like, no, with the bank. And I'm like, the mortgage advisor will be able to tell you before even going to the bank whether you can or can't buy the house. It's not you're not applying for like the green card in America or something. What is going on here? But back to as well, just knowledge in your 30s, because I saw today too, there was actually an article from yesterday where the rates are going up massively in Central Otago. Now, I think their mayor came out and said, well, if you're sitting on your property and you don't have any cash to pay it, perhaps use a reverse mortgage to pay your rates. And imagine telling that to some boomers down there, as retirees, in Bulawinaka in the central Otago. And part of me is like, well, you bought a house, you're sitting on this asset. Yeah, suck it up. You still need to pay your rates. You should have known that when you bought your property. But that would not fly with a lot. Imagine standing up in front of a group of those people saying, well, guys, it is what it is. You should have known this. Go out there, borrow some more debt to pay off your rates. That people's families are like, what the hell? You're eating into our equity and all these things. So there's going to be a huge fight having a suggestion like that.
That is a reckless thing to be said. So in terms of buying a house, if it's something that's important to you, I would definitely understand how far away you are, and based off the numbers I can see, and while this is not personalized financial advice, if I look at what I think is going to happen over the long term and thinking that property has historically increased like 6% a year over the long term, you should look and educate yourself and decide if it's the right thing for you. Because the other benefit of property, the sooner you start, is obviously you start to pay off the mortgage, the value of the house goes up over time, suddenly you have this crazy thing called equity. Investment property becomes an option for you down the track as well, and the first starting point is always your first home. So that's probably like buying your first home. That's a pretty big thing in your 30s, taking on a truckload of debt so you can pay the bank like $1 million over 30 years. How good?
But I think as well, if you're not going to buy a home, you have to have a plan. And not many people have been able to articulate to me if they're not going to buy, like what it is that they're going to do. People will say like, oh, I'm going to invest. And it's like, okay, have you run the numbers on that? Because I'm all for not buying a home if it's not your thing and not being in a rush to. But when I say to people, if you are going to, I'm like, you should know your numbers. So rates, insurance, interest, repairs, and looking at that, real estate agent fees, legal fees, how long are you actually going to stay there, whether you're being overly emotional rather than actually transactional and practical. If you aren't going to buy, equally, you need to figure out, okay, how much can I actually invest? What's that going to turn into? What's going to happen if rents keep going up by, say, 6% a year as well? And run all of those numbers to figure out so that you don't end up at some point and go, oh, shit, I thought not buying the home was the thing to do. I didn't realize that I was still going to have to pay rent or, provide for myself, and this is what my life would look like.
Or the security wise as well, you get like kicked out of the home. You don't have as much control over your environment. I mean, the other huge advantage of property is that it's a forced saving scheme. So funnily enough, you have to pay the mortgage every fortnight. You don't have to pay the investment company every fortnight to like invest for your future. And that's the huge risk, is that you don't want to buy a home. That's cool, but I think that's a really good shout, is you need to have that structure. And maybe just because you don't want to buy a home to live in, I mean, fundamentally, there's only two ways to grow wealth. It's property or it's shares. If you start a business, that's just more income up the top to invest into property or shares. That's it. If you might do investment property if you're not going to live in the house. Like, you would just compare all of the numbers and make the right decision for you.
And there's a lot of people now that are renting out their properties too, and everyone's like, oh yeah, it's rent vesting. Have you heard about it? It's like, fuck mate, this has been around it's just people that understand money turning their liability now back over to an asset and going, you know what, I'm going to move home, for instance, I'm going to rent it out. That's going to help cover those costs. And so they're stopping the bleed. People are like, oh no, it's this new rent vesting thing. This is not the first time I've been through a tricky economic cycle, and humans get creative or innovative in these situations because they're resilient, right?
Yeah. So you're buying a first home, definitely something to look at. I think a lot of the other ones are a lot about lifestyle and things happening to you around your life, right? And this is a huge risk, because when you talk about a lot of these things we're about to talk about, they're costs. They're not ways to grow your wealth. They are lifestyle decisions and costs, which can potentially involve you not achieving your longer term goals and racking up huge amounts of debt. So I think one of them we've got is getting married is one, and the amount of money that some people spend on weddings for a day that's a party, while it'll be the best day of your life until your next marriage. I'm just joking. It'll be a great day. Do you really want to spend like 50 grand or 100 grand for one day? So I would be thinking, when it comes to rule number one for all of these things, weddings, holidays, kids, no debt. Stay away from debt. Do not. I've heard of people like, after paying or getting a credit card to pay for a holiday. That is evil. You cannot do it. No exceptions is the rule. If maybe your income's gone and then you're in a hole and you have emergency funds, slightly different. But you've just got to remember, if you do these things, it's going to be very, very hard to unwind them once you mentally allow yourself to get into a habit like that. And second, to obviously start to pay the interest costs.
Mate, I've done the holiday on the Q card, so I've lived through that, and I can still remember the feeling of like, fuck it, it's 8K, who cares? Like the balance is 15 grand or whatever. Whack it on there, pay it off over time, no worries. But recently just booked to go to Fiji, and gee whiz, I'll tell you, 10 grand for a week. That's for two of us. Oh my God, didn't realise Fiji was that expensive anymore.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm going to sound privileged and all that stuff that I can go and do that. Yeah, maybe I am. However, I now know the feeling of what it's like to go, sweet, whack, paid full in cash, no debt, nothing, but have stacked cash to be able to do that. And I tell you what, it is a freeing feeling knowing that everything's paid for and I've built up funds to be able to do that. However, even when you get to the privileged stage or whatever you want to think of me to be able to do that, you're still then like, do I really need that holiday? I wonder if I could invest. What's that 5 grand, my share of it? What's that invested at 7% over the next 40 years?
Yeah.
But you still got to live your life at the same time, right?
And I bet when you paid 10 grand cash, you thought about it a hell of a lot more. It probably hurt a lot more than when you spent money that wasn't yours, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and that's no surprise at all. And that's why credit cards and loans for lifestyle assets are so poor, not just because of the interest costs. It's because you don't know what you had to do to, pay for that.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to learn, if you borrow the money, what the implications are to pay for it, but you probably weren't making an informed decision at the time because you're chasing your tail off the back of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what do you reckon, Luke? How much, if somebody said to you, I've spent $100,000 on my wedding, do you reckon they're like a fucking idiot? Do you go, I can see where you're coming from? What do you reckon?
I don't want to offend, so many people. It's interesting. I've done this with Keep the Change before. I've asked the audience, what have you spent on a wedding? And I've seen the ranges from like 3 grand through to over 100 grand. And I'll put the extremities on there. And when people spend 100 G's, they're like, oh, the fuck do they do it for 3 grand? Like, what the hell? And then people that spend 100 grand, the people that spent 3 grand are like, what? That's ridiculous. But I guess what I would say, and I often say this to business owners, is that they'll finance a $100,000 vehicle to get $30,000 of depreciation. I've not met many business owners that have got $30,000 of expenses on their profit and loss statement for educating themselves. And then taking it a layer deeper, usually a business will spend more on entertainment than they will on education. So if I were going to spend 100 grand on a wedding, then my question would be to myself, am I going to spend 100 grand on building this relationship and improving it and learning and making sure that we don't fuck this thing up?
So you'd advocate for $100,000 holiday?
People are going to do what they got to do, right?
Yeah. No, I like that. And I think it, like anything in isolation, like a number, the house you live in, the car you drive, the amount you spend on your wedding, whether you send your kids to private school or public school, like the suburb you live in it, all of it in isolation means absolutely fuck all. You have to take it, it's all relative to your situation. It's relative to your income, but most importantly to your goals. Yeah. If you spend, like my thing with like the $100,000 example is if you both earn $50,000 a year and your parents aren't contributing and you're going to take out this huge personal loan and it means you're not going to be able to buy a home and then you're going to have this expense going forward and then you fast forward to 65 and you're really that's a horrible decision in that scenario to spend $100,000 on a wedding. But if you've got really strong incomes, you can still buy the house, you can still pay off your mortgage in 15 years, you've got a wealth creation strategy, you can do all the things you want to do, then it doesn't matter, right? And I'm sure you thought about that with the holiday example, is this going to impact my ability to achieve my goals? Because otherwise, on the flip side, you stack all this cash, get to 65, have a heart attack, die, don't get to enjoy any of it. And most people have an example of somebody in their life where something similar like that has happened, where they haven't got to enjoy that sweet retirement they thought they would get. It's just a balance.
Yeah, 100%. That was me, man. You know, my stepdad died basically just about at retirement, and yeah, that was the plan. Is once we're 65, we're going to go and do all of those things. Never got to do it. Fortunately, had life insurance, which then helped mum clear some debt, which I'm sure we'll come to as well, and having to think about those big boy scenarios of having insurances and things like that. But yeah, it's probably all too common. And that's where I think as well, sometimes you make decisions in life that don't make any financial sense. And you then have to understand that you're going to overspend on it because it doesn't make financial sense. And I think for a lot of people that don't spend much on a wedding, they are, they're not into the emotional spend of it. So it's funny, I've spoken to a lot of people who have been married for a long time, and if they go back and look at their wedding, they're like, oh shit, don't speak to them anymore. Bloody hell, they're dead. I had this conversation on the weekend. My uncle was like, man, we went through them like, they're dead. Oh, bloody hell, I forgot about them. And we have all these people that in the moment we think, okay, it's emotional, we have to have them and whatnot. And then 20 years later or 10 years later, we look back and go like, oh shit. So I think that a wedding for a lot of people will actually be not a very smart decision financially, but it's still a good decision because it's an investment in their emotional well-being and things like that, should they want to do that. And we all individually try and make sense of that, and then we'll justify it. So the person who has a $3,000 wedding will be able to justify why. The person who had a $100,000 one, definitely they're going to tell you the 26 reasons why it was completely okay and you don't understand. It's just the done thing to do.
Yeah, I've never had a client I've had lots make stupid financial decisions, but all the ones with stupid decisions, I've never had one that hasn't had a really good reason why they did it.
Yeah.
So you're right. There's always good justification, and it may be valid. It may not be, but yeah. I mean, the other thing in terms of the wedding piece as well is the way I did it to work out who I wanted to invite. I divided the cost of the wedding per person, and I was like, do I like this person enough to spend $500 on them? And if the answer was no, then they're not invited.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So next big thing that happens after weddings, probably kids. Maybe not,
Could be before.
We're having a hell of a lot less kids these days as well. Yeah. So I've got an 18-month-old son, Cooper, so I'm know a lot more than I do about it than 18 months ago.
Yeah.
So when it comes to planning financially for having kids, I actually I'm seeing some people do it really well. I'm seeing some do it quite poorly. So I think there needs to be some really good conversations around having kids and the financial implications before doing it, because, you're coming back to like the 1985 example, the days are gone where you can have like a one income household on an average income, and then somebody's at home looking after the kids, right? The reality is that, in most, I'd say like 90% of households, you've got both parents working while trying to raise a family. It's not easy. So you need to have that conversation with your spouse going, first one is, what are we going to do in terms of work? How much time do we get off work? What is the government benefit for having a child? I think it works out to be about $13,000 over a year. And then, in terms of our employers, do they not pay us anything? There's some really good employers out there. Really good website to Google is Crayon. They do comparisons of all employers and their like parental benefits. So go and check that out. But some employers pay like 6 months full income that whole period, right? Which is sweet that you can spend time with your new child while not having to work about paying your mortgage or anything. But there's a lot that just don't have any income coming through and go down to a one income for 6 or 12 months for very good reasons. But then, most households don't live off one income, right? Most households are living off two incomes. And then you're going in a scenario where you're not getting much sleep, you're stressed, you're probably like getting angry at your partner because they're not getting up, you're having to get up to go, feed the baby or whatever it might be. You don't want to add financial stress on top of that. So we talked in the previous episode about like the examples where it's really good to have cash available, and this scenario is a really, really good time to have cash sitting aside. So you need to work out, how long am I going to be off work for, and making sure you've got enough cash set aside. So essentially each fortnight when it would have been your pay, money goes into your bank account like it would, and then you can continue to live, because you do not want to be stressed while having a kid. That would be my big tip around having kids when it comes to your finances.
Yeah, I like that, mate. I think as well, by your 30s, you've probably got a good feeling for what your relationship with money and debt is like. Some people just don't like it. And I was listening recently to somebody who makes a lot of money. They bought a property and straight away and used debt. They're just like, nah, fuck, I'm clearing this. And all of their friends were like, what are you doing? Like, the rate's cheap. You don't need to do that. And they're like, no, I hate the fact that I've got that debt, so I'm going to prioritize clearing it. I know I don't need to. I know I could invest the money. Really good investor. Like one of those people who don't need to be paying off debt any faster than they need to. But for them, they're like, no, I don't have a good relationship with it. I'd rather get rid of it. Then I'm not going to think about it, and I can speed up my life in other areas. So I think by our 30s, we sort of know some of that stuff because we've taken on debt. We have, probably not earned much at times. We've earned more at other times. Then we learn, what did we do? What silly things did we do? So, I think that we then have to try and weave that together with our partner as well, and have those open conversations around things that are going to impact both of us. And I know personally for me, I've sort of, gone through a journey of not having much and being in debt and consumer debt and stuff, to thinking, I would rather be financially secure before I start thinking about having children. Whereas, I'll read sometimes online where people will say, oh, I've got multiple kids and, the government don't give us enough and this country's fucked and all. And I'm like, holy shit. I couldn't live like that. I would, I'd probably be like, I'm probably not going to have multiple kids because I know too much. And so I think too far ahead to then know what the reality is of that. And I'm like, that wouldn't be, that's too cavalier, that's too risky for me. I want to sort of be in control of my stuff. But I've had to do work to know that. And equally that person, they probably have just thought, no, like I just want to have multiple kids and stuff, and surely it won't be that hard. And now they're having to see the costs that are going out and going, oh shit, this sucks.
Yeah.
But really the only person that's going to come back and control it all is yourself.
Yeah, and I was the exact same, like in terms of I didn't want to have kids any earlier because I wanted to be in a certain level of financial stability. Like my wife works 4 days a week, and we're lucky she gets that one day off, and that's her favorite day of the week where her and Cooper go have fun and do their thing while Dad's
go to football.
Yeah, go to football, messy play where they just throw Play-Doh around. So it's a great old time. But you're 100% right, and you touched on something else really important there as well in terms of lack of a better term, the baggage that you come into a relationship with. Like people have seen parents struggle with money, or they've had struggles with the money, or somebody hasn't had any of those struggles at all. Or for some people, they've been brought up in a household where you talk about money and others haven't. And when you're just like when you love somebody and you come together as a couple, you just have to appreciate with these big life decisions where there's always any big life decision, there's a financial implication, good or bad, off the back of it. And that's not saying you do or don't do it, but there is a financial implication off the back of it. You've just got to realize that maybe your partner's experiences, they're going to think about this whole thing differently. Yep. And that's why having just really, we get home, we're tired at the end of the day. And I've certainly had to go, I can't be bothered tonight, and then we don't have these conversations. But it's like anything, right? You have to communicate, you have to talk about these things and explain where you're coming from and understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, I think you've got to be on the same page with that stuff too. You've got to spend some time doing it, because you're gonna have those chats, but then separately you're gonna go back to your own families, back to your units where you grew up and the way they believe things around money. You're gonna say, "Oh, we're gonna do this," and they're like, "Whoa, hang on, we don't do that around here. Why are you doing that, or why are you not doing that?" And then you're like, "Oh, fuck, I've got to try and defend." And then you might get impacted by that. And you come back to your unit and you're like, "Oh, actually, I don't know if we should do this anymore." And you're like, what the hell? What's happened here? But someone's gone back to their home, and so then it's all changed again. So I think you've really got to spend more time. And I think you work in finance, so this is what you do all day long. I work in accounting, and so I don't even think about it. I'm just like, okay, we're going to talk about money again. Like, that's fine. But these are highly emotional topics and conversations for a lot of people, but they don't really need to be. It should be like fun to get on the same page.
Yeah, I mean, like with my wife, like I'm very lucky. She's very prudent with money. It's not like I've got somebody out going buying handbags and all that kind of stuff. But she's from Invercargill, and like I certainly see that she's comes from a family that's like quite conservative around money. So like when they think about debt, like I'm very pro. I'm like thinking about, how do I pay down my mortgage? But then I want more investment properties. Or, we've got to get a new lease for our office. Should we be buying a commercial property and looking at that kind of stuff? And like, businesses, blah, blah, blah. They're very like debt stresses them out. And I've got to be conscious. I'm not just making decisions for myself, right? I'm making decisions for our family unit, and her experience in the past will certainly have an impact about how she feels about those decisions.
Yeah.
So it's just taking all of that into consideration when you're making joint decisions around your life and then the impact around money.
Yeah, we touched on it in the last pod as well, but money is a tool, nothing more, nothing less. It's coins, it's notes, it's metal, it's paper, it's digits on a screen. Us humans, are the ones that give it all the emotion, the fear, the scarcity, the abundance, like whatever emotion, we wrap it on. You can get any note in New Zealand and have a look at it, and none of that shit is on there. It's all inside ourselves, and that's a hard thing to accept. But once you know that and start thinking like that, you're like, oh, okay. Like I pick up that $100 note, you as an individual, you like that emotion that you have, that's yours. Like you got that from somewhere, you built that. And once you know that, you can kind of realize like, shit, I kind of created the way I feel about this. Therefore, I can change the way I feel about it too. Because it doesn't say pick up the $100 note. It's like, Luke, you've got anxiety now. You should really invest this really quickly and see what you can do with it. It's just a $100 note, a means of exchange.
And it's interesting in terms of different age groups, right? Like those that have used money all of their lives versus those that have just like tapped and goed and never had to actually, because I think there's a different relationship where you hold money. But you're right. The value of money is what we as a society have decided it's worth. And then you're giving somebody money in exchange for something, either a service or a product, right? Here's $200, cook me dinner. And like, was it good value or not? That's your perception of like the experience and whatever it was. Or I'm going to buy that cup for $10, or I'm going to buy it for $100 because it's got the Keep the Change logo on, but I love Keep the Change. So I perceive value in that.
Yeah.
Like probably a tangent.
We love a tangent, mate. All right, let's get us back on track. So we've gone buying a house, partner, holiday as well, partner, kids, that sort of thing. What else? Oh, weddings as well.
Yeah, just with kids, daycare. Let's talk about daycare for a second. So daycare is fucking expensive.
You do, mate. I don't know anything about it. So.
I think people are really surprised by like how expensive daycare is.
Yeah.
And it's probably like if you are going to have kids in the future, to be aware that, like our daycare costs like, it's like $900 a fortnight. And granted, we're in Auckland and we're in a nice area, but the cost of daycare, you got to have a conversation with, once again, your partner around where are we comfortable sending our child for like 8 to 10 hours a day, right?
Yeah.
That's a big decision around who's going to influence your child in like arguably their most important years. Whether depending on the outcome, there is a financial implication which could have a huge impact to our budget, which will impact, our ability to pay down our debt, to, save for the future, to live the life we want to live, achieve our goals, blah, 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 blah. So that is a very large financial cost. And I'm a financial advisor and I pay a lot in daycare, but we've decided, conversation around what we perceive as value, we think that's an important thing to do. Somebody else might think something completely different because there's quite a few different options out there, but you need to realize that there is a scenario where that's going to cost you a lot of money and you need to factor it into your budget.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I kind of years ago thought I would like to be in a position that when I have children, if we wanted to, and if my partner wanted to as well, we could afford a nanny or an au pair or something. Years ago, is that even the word, au pair or au pair?
Yeah, au pair. Yep, and nanny. They are even more fucking expensive.
Yeah.
So like we looked into, because the other thing you don't factor in is how often you're going to get bloody sick. Like Cooper went to daycare and he got like, we all got gastro. Tell you what, 3 people trying to look after each other with gastro at a good time, and then foot and mouth like back to back.
Shit, I thought that was only for cows.
Yeah, look, I don't call my son a cow, all right, mate? No. So like you get those illnesses and then there's impact on like sick leave and blah, 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 blah. But so we looked at a nanny at that point, and that was like 50 G's a year for a nanny. And we were just like, no, we're not doing that. We were like, oh, maybe you like share a nanny with somebody, but that's an expensive option.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I don't even know what it costs, but on my thought process years ago, I would never have thought of that. I'd be like, that is what rich people do. That's disgusting and stuff. But as I went down, well, not sorry, disgusting, but my thinking, wasn't clean enough to understand why people did this stuff. But then I started to learn more about valuing your time and things like that. But then also I've heard, why would you have a nanny or an au pair? Don't you want to raise a child? Why are you even having a child? And I'm like, whoa, Jesus, that's someone's emotional response. But again, you go back to what we're talking about. Yeah. Go back to back in the day, a lot of people would have children and that was their primary role, was to look after the children, and we could have one person working and the other person staying in the household looking after the child. For a lot of people, that's not a reality anymore. And so I think that's where a little bit of that difference comes in generational thinking too, where, yeah, cool, I kind of see where you're coming from, because when you were having children, that was part of why you wanted to and what you were doing. But now we're kind of backed into a corner over here where we've got to be thinking about two incomes and then, okay, then we're going to sacrifice some of that income to have a nanny or whatever. But times are always changing, right?
Yeah, definitely. And so, I mean, like a lot of these things are just, they're decisions on what you want in your life, and whether you have kids or buy a house or go on. I mean, I think most people want to go on a holiday, but all those other kind of big things, get married or not get married, how much you spend, it's completely up to you. But my big thing with a lot of these things is you have to have a plan and you have to understand the implications. If you don't understand the implications of spending a lot of money on something, then you're putting your head in the sand, and that's reckless. You should know what's going on. The other thing you should be thinking about when we're starting to talk about, buying a house, getting married, having kids, is the really big kind of adult, semi-boring conversations where we're talking have a will.
Oh,
so,
mate, yeah, good.
50% of Kiwis, don't get too excited, 50% of Kiwis don't have a will. And I've spoken to a hell of a lot of people where somebody has died and has created absolute chaos in people's lives. And you just go, oh, this will all be straightforward. It'll just go to this person. But then like this relative pops up, and then the government takes some money, and then it ends up in probate for all this period of time. Then there's all these fees. So have a will. It does not need to be complicated. Just make sure you have a good conversation. When it comes to those like online will solutions, buyer beware. It might be really cheap up front. The costs on the backside, like I have one client at the moment where like the husband who passed away could have spent $400 with a lawyer, but didn't. Now there's like $15,000 of fees and it all getting dragged out. So just be aware, but please get a will. Life insurance, income protection, health insurance. Look, all of these things are additional costs. Kiwis suck at having these conversations.
Yeah.
So, and the other problem is like insurance advisors will get incentivized to sell you more of the thing, which creates this real weird relationship. Is this person actually looking after me or not? The fundamentals of life insurance and income protection are, if you get sick, do you still need your income to pay your bills? Most people sub 65 are like, yeah, nah, I'd like my income, please. So you need income protection. Life insurance, is there somebody dependent on me? If I die tomorrow, is my wife going to be able to continue to pay the mortgage? Is she going to be able to look after my son? Is she going to be able to maintain a quality of life I would be comfortable with? That would lead to amount of life insurance and amount of income protection. You might talk to an insurance advisor. At Lighthouse, we do insurance as part of all the stuff that we do. You might talk to an insurance advisor. They go, cool, this makes sense. This is how much you need. And you'd be like, fuck off, I'm not spending that much money on insurance.
Yeah.
And the problem at that point is a lot of people just switch off and they go, I'll do nothing.
Yeah.
And that's not the way to do it. The way to do it is to go, okay, some insurance is better than no insurance. So making sure that like obviously, like if you needed, your family needed $1 million for argument's sake, they'd be much happier with $500,000 than nothing and a funeral to pay for, and a lot of grief to go through as well. So work out with your budget what you can do, and I would also get advice as well. There's lots of DIY tools, but insurance is very like, trauma cover, critical conditions, total and permanent disability. What's mortgage repayment cover? Just go talk to somebody and then they can kind of help you work out. But I talk about like wills and insurance is like you've got a list of like 1 to 10 things to do. Wills and insurance number 10, you do 1 to 9, and then you fill it back up with more interesting stuff, and wills and insurance stay at the bottom. So just do some hard adulting and get it sorted.
If there's ever an industry that needs to do some bloody work to help educate Kiwis, it's the insurance industry, right? And actually explain some of these things and storytell. And that for me feels like an industry. If that was your niched into industry, you could go out there and thrash good content and people would learn so much because, talking about some of the stuff, I've got a business partner as well. So that means that I've got the whole not just money with my partner, then with a business partner and how they do things. You've got to understand, okay, what's happening in their life. Then you build a business, because I've gone through that journey, and you're like, fuck, if he dies, now I need some insurances for that too. Otherwise, I'm buying half of my business back to pay out his estate. And you start to realize, like, okay, these conversations are transactional, not emotional, because you start to just have more of them. But I'm looking at the insurances going, I think I've already got that insurance because it's over, oh no, that's over there, and that's over. I'm like, oh man, like I've done all these questionnaires before and stuff, and like you say, there's trauma and TPD and loss of income and the different names across all the different brands, and you just like, oh geez, I can see why for a lot of people it just gets too hard basket. And they go,
and insurance is interesting, like where we like health insurance, people love like, oh, I can claim my I can get a massage or get physio, or like I'm getting some like our perception of value. I'm getting some value from this thing. Life insurance. Look. Let me, if you don't know, if you've claimed on your life insurance or if it's been good value for money, it hasn't worked out well for you.
You ain't getting it.
Yeah. So, and there was this thing in the paper, I think a month ago, with a lady in her 30s with 2 kids. She cancelled her life insurance because she reviewed her budget and thought she couldn't afford it anymore, and she got diagnosed with terminal cancer like a month later. Yeah. We don't think these things have any value until they do have value. And for anybody who says, we're just not insurance people, like what the hell? You'd be surprised how often I hear something along those lines. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm not a cancer person either. So I guess I'm just not going to get cancer.
Yeah. But I'm not an insurance person.
Yeah.
That's what I say to you.
Yeah. That's how some people think about this stuff. And it's obviously it's a lack of knowledge and information and understanding.
If you're not an insurance person, that to me, that means that you're an exceptional investor and de-risker of risk in your life. So fucking teach me, what are you investing in?
Yeah.
Where have you stacked up all these pools of cash so that you can provide for yourself should these things happen in your life?
And I can just imagine something that's going to pop up in your DMs, Luke. Somebody's going to say to you, I promise you, what we do is we self-insure and we put $100 a fortnight into our insurance bank account, and it's worked out really well for us because now we've got $5,000. The counter to that is, what happens if the first time you put in the $100 you died or you got sick? It could work out. Statistically, it probably is going to work out. That's why there's actuaries and insurance companies that work out all this stuff. Yeah. But I think that's a long enough rant about insurance.
Well, I mean, it's important though, man, because for me recently, I went to a specialist. I think that cost me $300. I then needed to get a CT scan, $1,500. Sweet. Okay, we've got your CT scan back. Come back $350 for the follow-up appointment. 2 rack. Bang, gone. They're saying to me, they're like, oh, when I got the CT scan, oh, do you have medical insurance? I'm like, I don't know. I pay for something, and I'm going to have to email them and find out whether it's covered or not. The beauty is I've got myself to a position where I could afford to go and do that, but that's $2,000, man. We were just talking before about how a third of people don't have $500 for an emergency. So what did happen though is I actually I could have gone and done this ages ago, but I'm like, well, that's $2,000. I might just put that off. I might, I'll get to that at some stage. Now I can afford to do it. But for a lot of people, I think you don't know what you may need some sort of emergency fund for or insurance for. And then you understand the value of having it when you can actually use it.
Yeah. And if you're single and you decide, I don't want health insurance, I don't want income protection, and you get sick, I mean, that's on you. Like at the end of the day, if you don't have life insurance or income protection, and something happens to you, that is reckless. Like that's impacting the people that you love and are the most important in your life. So go sort your shit out.
On the will piece, mate, I've written down here, I saw the stat, public trust research shows only 26% of people aged 35 to 44 have a will.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So 1 in 4. And you'd have kids by that stage for a lot of people. So who's going to look after your kids? Uncle Luke going to fucking pop round, chuck the podcast on and say, hey, I'm going to help out now. I'm not going to want that.
That's not going to be a good generation, is it?
No. So you need to be thinking about that stuff. Like, what are you doing? You're not wrapping up and you're having kids, and then you're not thinking about who's going to look after them if you're not here.
Yeah, and if you get married, your will's null and void as well. So if you've got a will, if you got a will and then got married and that wasn't in the will to start with that you were going to get married, then you're starting again as well, which a lot of people don't know about either.
Yeah, there we go. What else, mate? Have we missed anything?
I mean, there's a lot of things going on there. So I would really advocate, like, obviously, you know, I'm a financial advisor. I sell financial plans. Whether it's with me or you're doing some sort of like DIY thing, you do need some form of a plan to map these things out.
Yeah.
You know, what are my goals in the next 12 months, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, and like map key life things and then thinking about the bigger ones around retirement. Because fundamentally, like most people just want the same things, right? They want to live in a certain lifestyle, have a certain house. They want to be able to achieve financial freedom by a certain age. And if you've got kids, be able to help your kids at some point in the future. So you just need to map all these things out and go, by doing these things, what are the impact on my other goals? Because I have lots of people go, here are my 10 goals. And I go, well, that's nice, Luke. You can do 8 or you can do 10 in a reduced version. And like financial planning is a lot of it's about making, having clarity in terms of decision making. So understanding if I do this here, here is the impact here. If I buy a house versus don't buy a house, here are the impact. Well, should I look at an investment property? I got some equity, interest rates are 7%. What's that going to do? Are you going to have kids if you take on more debt? Like it's all very interlinked, and just being super conscious about your decision making. We'll spend, 6 hours on the weekend watching sport, but we won't bother spending 30 minutes like creating some bullet points and talking to our partner about our future.
Yeah, it's bizarre. I think the amount of people that don't actually know what they want from their life. You don't need to know exactly, but at least know the direction you're going in and have some sort of like goals and plans, so that then you're not just falling into, we're around at Barb's place and they were talking about doing this, and like, why don't we do that too? Like, what the hell? A month ago you hadn't even had that thought. Why all of a sudden are you now like, yeah, let's go and do that. Let's move to wherever and switch careers or whatever.
Yeah,
it sort of stops you doing that flippant shit that just then takes you down another path.
Yeah, it is terrifying. Like I think about it, or like I'm walking around and looking at people and going like, I wonder what they're thinking about and that sort of thing without being creepy. But the amount of people that are on autopilot is just going through life or trying to get to the weekend, or they like hate their jobs and they're just miserable by doing that and they're not doing anything about it, or they just take on all this debt or don't have clarity of their budget. Like so much of this is just like actually like knowing like what the fuck is going on, like what is happening in my life, and having like a clear plan. This is my life now. I like these bits. I don't like these bits. So I'm going to do something about them so I can in the future have more of the bits I like. And I want this thing in 5 years. So this is the roadmap to go and get this thing. And the antidote to anxiety is action, right? So take some bloody action.
Yeah, mate, I'd written down here, which we haven't touched on, but 30s, I think you should have a good understanding. You should have done enough work to know what you do like doing, what you don't like doing, like you said before. And if you don't like your career, that's not your fucking partner's responsibility. It's not your kid's responsibility. Like, that's yours. You got to sort that shit out. If you're coming home miserable, angry, upset, complaining all the time, you got yourself in there, you took the job. Get yourself out, sort that shit out.
Yeah, 100%. I sometimes talk to people and they go like, I want to retire when I'm 40, James. And I go, you picked the wrong career. And they go, what do you mean? Like financial freedom, you say is a good thing to work towards. And I'm like, nah, if you're like going to spend like essentially like more or less the best years of your life, whether your health is the best, going, I hate this thing and my goal is to not do the thing that I hate, just take a backward step, reskill, go do something else. And then you don't have to work and your whole life. There's a lot of people that's not their thing, and that's completely fine. But find something that you're passionate about, and the whole like the Monday test, like or Sunday night. Do you get around to Sunday night and do you look forward to Monday, or do you go like, oh man, I really don't want to do this tomorrow? And if the answer is that, and we're talking 30s, right? You've got bills, you've got kids, you've got responsibilities. Don't go quit your job tomorrow. Please don't do that. That would be a bad thing to do.
Build a plan.
But what's your plan? How are you going to change the script? Or are you just going to turn around and be like, well, the reason this thing happened to me is, this, and then my boss promised me this, or my boss is a dick or whatever. Take action, do something. Instead of like things happening to you, what are you doing to control your environment? And sure, like you'll get knocked around, things will not go your way. But if you take consistent steps over time and have a plan that you're implementing, it's going to work out.
this one will sound really bad, mate, but I'm going to say it anyway. But it bewilds me, the people that will go online and they'll say about, oh, I work in this toxic environment and it creates anxiety for me and my employer needs to be doing more and all this shit. I'm like, fuck, why wouldn't you leave?
Yeah.
Like, why don't you just get out of there as fast as you can? And they think that that's all going to get solved by their employer doing more, putting in some sort of anxiety and health and well-being plan
PGs
and stuff.
and
yeah, and I'm like, yo, most of those things are internal. We're going to have to deal with them ourselves and not rely on our employer, etc. But the amount of people that live like that, and I know that this will be unpopular with some people, but I would look at that and go, I want to get in control of that. I'm getting the fuck out of here. If I think it's that bad, then I'm going to own it and I'm going to leave.
Well, the terrifying thing is if you don't do anything, who are you going to become? Because if you're in a toxic, and we know those people who stay in those like toxic environments and don't take control, they don't become a better person. They take
it home.
Yeah, it impacts who they are.
And then the rest of the world shows up like that as well. Like, oh yeah, everyone's treating everyone like that. And it's like, whoa, man, you've got yourself down a spiral here. You need to like own this.
Yeah.
And get back in control of it. But yeah, that said, it can be tough when you are in an environment where you feel like you're not getting treated well, that sort of thing. There's a bit of a difference, but acknowledge it, see it, because you're going to go tell all your mates about it, and all of them are going to be sitting there from the outside being like, why do you still work there?
Yeah.
What's this all about? And then they're going to start pulling back because they're going to go like, oh, I don't want to have this conversation again, and you're going to think, oh, my friends aren't there for me, none of them seem to care. Yeah, like see what's going on, but it's hard to see when you're in that. Anyway, career plans and past, I think by our 30s, we need to know more about that. Emergency funds, we touched on. Investments, we're going to have a plan, so then we're going to know what sort of things we're going to be aiming our money towards. No consumer debt, Jesus, please. Like if you can get out of that phase by your 30s, I think you're going to set yourself up well to get into that investing, delay gratification and saving for the future type thing. But I know people in their 30s, they'll still have credit cards, consumer debt and stuff. But if you can squeeze that down and try and get rid of it, you'll become a different person.
100%. And there's just no acceptable scenario where you've got those debts. Now, you might have those debts right now. And of course, you should if you want to feel bad about having those debts, feel bad about it. But once again, take action. Try and have a little bit less tomorrow, a little bit less the day after. And we overestimate what we can do in 6 months. We underestimate what we can do in 10 years. And it's just how do we slowly become that person we want to be, build that life that we want over time. And it does just take time.
I like it, mate. The only other things I had, relationships, which we touched on, goals we've touched on, health and well-being type plans, so thinking about what it is that you can do that's going to keep you exercising or looking after yourself. It might be Pilates, it might be running, it might be gym. You want to find a rhythm in your 30s by then and know, so that you're not jumping between all of the different fads and things like that, and then you get to your 40s and you look back and go like, oh, I did the F45 for a bit, and then I did the 79 hard ups or whatever the fuck all these things are called, and you didn't stick to any of them.
I told you to stay away from that website, the 79 hard ups.
And then you're still jumping around and you don't know like what it is, what's your thing that you're going to actually be able to take through for maybe a couple of decades.
Yeah, I don't know if this is the right time to bring it up, Luke, but you haven't been replying to my text messages about us going to Pilates together.
Oh, no, sorry.
So just let me know.
Yeah. Not my thing. Maybe in my 40s, mate, I've got some spare time. I don't even play golf. Like a lot of my mates got into golf, like you said at the start of this. Sorry, guys, my time's too valuable.
Yeah.
And they're like, whoa, hang on, mate. Like, no, a lot of business gets done on the golf course and shit. I'm like, yeah, a lot of fucking business gets done in my inbox and me meeting with people and getting shit done as well. So keep your golf. But I appreciate that people like that. But for me, it's not my thing. But it doesn't mean that I won't get into it later on.
No on Pilates after this? Or?
And golf. Yeah, you can keep both of those. Yeah. We've touched on, and that's about me, mate. So cool. I think we've covered that.
Nice. One more thing I just want to touch. I mean, we've talked about probably quite quote unquote normal, buying a house, having kids, getting married, going on holidays, whatever. If they're not your things, they are common things that will impact a lot of people, which is why we're talking about them. But whatever your goals are. Do not be that autopilot person. Do not just go through, those just steps of life trying to get to the weekend and then doing it again. What is the life that you're trying to build? Fundamentally, that's what this episode is about, just targeted at certain people in their 30s. So what is the life you are trying to build? What are the goals that you're trying to work towards? Make those goals as smart and specific as you possibly can, and talk about them not like, I want these things, but I have these things, so they're real and you're working towards them. And then reverse engineer the financial decisions you need to make off the back of it. If I say, Luke, you need to save $1 million, that's going to feel really far away. But if I break down going, hey, Luke, based off this like compounding returns over this 10-year plan, the only thing I need you to do this week, Luke, to become the person in 10 years, set a budget. That's the only thing I need you to do this week. Okay, what's week 2's action? And then it builds off the back of it. So if these specific things aren't your thing, what are the things that you're working towards?
Yeah, I love that, man. I reckon it always should actually be aimed back towards fulfillment and happiness. And if you do those two things well in your life, normally all of the shit that we've spoken about will look really good to other people, and they'll think like, oh, they've got it all figured out. And it's like, yeah, because they've aimed for fulfillment and happiness. And that's why I think it was important to touch on for a bit there, not being happy in your role, for instance, and not liking that, and knowing that the vehicle you're in isn't taking you to where you want to go. You got to own that. You got to get out of that vehicle, get into a different one, and all of the stuff starts to become a bit easier. And on that, mate, today, my phone rings this morning. I answered it. I think it could be a lead. People on the golf course know I'm taking lead calls. This dude's like, oh, you do answer. Holy shit, you answered. And I was like, what the hell was going on here? And I might have to take my phone number off the internet, mate. I think I'm getting a little bit too famous. But anyway, young fella, and he's like, oh, I just wanted to get your opinion on something. Do you have time to talk? I'm like, no. And he's like, oh, like 5 minutes. I'm like, no. I'm like, what do you want and who are you? And he's like, oh.
I'm your Uber driver.
yeah, you've left your keys behind again. You know when you were drunk on the weekend? Yeah. He's like, I'm basically, like, long story short, like, I was hoping to get your advice. I live in Christchurch. I'm thinking about getting into real estate, and basically, instead of DMing me, it's a phone call. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to give this kid a little bit of my time. I said, well, basically, like, why do you want to do that? Why do you want to get into real estate? And he said, well, I want to have like the freedom of my time so I can get to a point where I can do what I want. And I was like, okay, so that's cool. Like that, and that's what you want with your life. Yeah. I'm like, well, guess what? When you're a real estate agent, you don't have freedom of time, because every Saturday and every Sunday you're going to be at open homes. And when vendors and buyers ring you between 5 and 9 p.m, if you want the commission, you're going to have to answer, you're going to have to do work. So you're working for them now. So you ain't just going to do whatever the fuck you want and go to golf and shit. You're actually going to be told by people what it is that they need you to do. So I said, real estate, great vehicle to earn good money, and you can hedge against inflation because house prices normally move, and so then your commission's based on that. But trap is, year 2, I'm making good coin now. I'm going to get the Range Rover. I've got my cool flag out the back and I'm putting it on Instagram and shit. That thing's on finance. You're going to think the market's going to go up every year, but that's not how it works, and you're going to spend more, and then you're not going to stack cash aside. So if you want the life where you get to decide what you do, you need to go into a vehicle like real estate, go hard for 10 years, stack the cash, avoid spending all the cash, and then go, maybe I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to do less of it. But you've built resources that you can lean on so that you get more in control of your time. Otherwise, you're going to be a slave to your phone, and you're just going to be catering to every demand of a vendor or a buyer. He's like, oh, yeah, that sounds quite good. I'm like, all right, go take action. See you, lad.
Yeah. So he's like, you don't want me to take you to the city? Or now I think like when it comes to real estate agents, that's why they've got quite like such high churn in the industry, right? It's, sunset selling or whatever it's called, and it's very glamorized. Like, you just roll in, get paid fat commissions, and walk back out and in $3,000 suits. While, we know the really successful ones are the ones that have incredible work ethic, but the ones who thought it would be something, they get paid really well and walk back out. It's not that, because you got to do the work, funnily enough.
Like everything, mate, you have to do the work. Just like we have today, being here with the people for over an hour. Thanks, mate, for your time. If people want to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Lighthousefinancial.co.nz. Have a look at the website. Checks and Balances podcasts go out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
Shit, you've increased the frequency.
I know. Well, you said we were a little bit lower than you, so we've done that in the last 45 minutes because we're chasing you down.
Nice.
So go and check those out. Check us out on Instagram for your favorite finance memes. And if you need any help, sorting out your insurances, talking to a mortgage broker, you want to put a financial plan in place, happy to have a chat, see if we can help.
Good man. We'll see you next time.